See the webinar has started. Looks like we have some participants joining us on the webinar. We started a few minutes early to let people get logged on and get their Zoom set up the way they like. So I want to welcome you to today's webinar. A few more minutes and then we'll get started. If you're already here and in the chat, go ahead and toss in where you're zooming in from today. Myself, I'm calling in from San Antonio, Texas. Oh, another Texas. Great. Canada. I love this part. We were just talking about how we love to hear where everybody is from. Great. Ooh, Wisconsin. Arizona, down here, hot with me. All right, we're going to continue welcoming some folks. We are at the top of the hour, but we'll give people another minute or two to continue rolling in, and then we'll get started with the introductions. Nice, great. Washington. And again, if you're just joining us by chat, go ahead and let us know where you're calling in from today for our webinar on transforming FOIA responses. Sugarland, always loved that as a name, Sugarland. I'm originally from Denver, new to the Texas area, so still getting used to it here. Okay. See a few more people rolling in. Looks like we'll get the numbers trailing off here, but I know people will keep rolling in as they keep getting settled in. All right, I do want to go ahead and start the webinar by welcoming all of you and thank you for attending the webinar today. We are thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar. My name is RJ Morrow, and I'm on the ARMA Board of Directors, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, next slide, please. We want to thank our ARMA members for joining us today. From online education and industry opportunities, we encourage you to connect and gain professional resources through your membership. If you're not an ARMA member already, I highly encourage you to visit arma.org and see all that ARMA has to offer. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, back one slide. To become a contributor and to continue giving you important informational webinars, we need your help. Are you an expert who would like to help educate our industry on an important topic? Become a contributor. You can also do so by following the links on our ARMA website and applying today. Now to talk about InfoCon. Everybody's gearing up. InfoCon is in 1 month. We are so excited that it's happening in Houston, Texas, not too far from me. And we look to welcome everybody on October 14th through the 16th. As a thank you for attending today's ARMA webinar, we are giving you an exclusive promo code. You can use the code 24webinar to receive $300 off the current price of full conference registration. It must be a new registration and be sure to register before September 18th as prices will increase. And remember, this applies to both members and non-members joining us today. InfoCon is the largest conference dedicated to information management professionals, and many people on today's webinar will be attending. I know I'll be there. This year's event will feature insightful sessions, practical workshops, valuable networking opportunities, and an interactive expo hall. Connect with industry leaders and learn about the latest trends, technologies, and best practices in information management. Next slide. Thank you. As we are here on Zoom, just a couple of housekeeping things on Zoom. If you need, you can easily turn the closed caption on by following these prompts down at the bottom bar of your Zoom. And furthermore, we'd like to encourage you to use the Q&A feature today if you have questions. Q&A is available throughout the session, and we'll be looking at your questions, and we'll have time for questions at the end as well as through the session. Next slide. So biggest questions people usually have with all of these is, can I have a copy of the recording? Can I have a copy of the slides? Yes. The professional members will receive access to the recording and the slides after the meeting has ended. So a follow-up email will be sent 24 hours after the webinar. So next, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Gimmal, for providing this important and educational content. And now I have the honor of turning the webinar over to Kim to talk about Gimmal and our speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us live. I know everybody's busy. It's September, back to school season for the parents out there, and even, just learning and development for your own career and professional growth. And so if for those of you who do not know Gimmal, I do see a few familiar names here. So hello again, and welcome to new folks. Gimmal is Information Governance Simplified. We are headquartered out in Houston. Many of you may or may not know of us as a legacy records management company. And throughout the years, we've really modernized, helped folks migrate from legacy systems, and then also help our customers, both in the private and public sectors, navigate change, compliance, regulations, both on both sides of the information governance model. And so today I am especially excited to introduce you to one of our partners in the eDiscovery realm, CloudNine. Jess Moore, who is the customer success manager at CloudNine, also headquartered out in Houston. And then Rick Clark, who comes from a bunch of, thought leadership, expertise. I will let you both introduce yourselves, but CloudNine comes from a heavy professional services law firm, legal tech world, and many of you may or may not be wondering where and how eDiscovery falls under the overarching information governance and data governance umbrella. And so we will be speaking about it today. And Rick and Jess, I'm so excited to have you, and please take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it. So I am Jess Moore. She mentioned that I am in the Houston area of Texas. So very excited to see a lot of those Texas people that I saw in the chat there. And I am the customer success manager at CloudNine. I've been here a little over 12 years, and I have had great opportunities to work with corporate and law firms, but also really love and hyper focus on the government aspect, state and local government, federal government, and really digging into those FOIA requests, as well as the eDiscovery litigation. So excited to talk about it. We have a lot of great things to share all around this. Should hopefully interest everybody here.
Great. Thank you, Jess. And thank you, Kim, for having us. Again, really appreciate it. Such a great group at ARMA. And my quick introduction, I've been in the eDiscovery space for over 20 years. Started a few software companies and a conference as well. So I've been in really thought leadership, but at CloudNine, by way of acquisition, we had started a software company that was all around modern data. How do we manage cell phone data? How do we manage Slack or Teams? And so I've spent the past probably 7-8 years really focused in on that for eDiscovery, but that certainly transcends into information governance, FOIA type requests, all of the above. So Again, excited about the topic. Kim, thanks for having us. Arma, thanks for hosting us as well. So I'll dive right in on the first slide here. And this is all around what I like to call modern data. Now, this is 2023. I think the industry writ large was good about keeping up with the eDiscovery Minute up until this year for some reason. So, but alas, you see trends growing from year to year. Growth in things like Teams and Slack, so corporate chat applications. But I also expand out into things like social media posts, Twitter, now X direct messages, Facebook messages, all of the evidence that can really help build the story around a particular case. I have found that FOIA type requests, whether federal, state, or local, are still avoiding the requests of Teams and other type of chat data. But in eDiscovery, I speak at a lot of conferences and sometimes from month to month. And it's interesting to poll the audience because I'm seeing more hands go up when I say, hey, have you had Teams or Slack or anything else involved in your case? And so we're seeing those trends growing. So in FOIA requests, this may come into play down the road. So just planting the seed of have good data practices around that. Kim will certainly talk more about that on the IG side. But on the reactive side for discovery and these types of requests, those are some of the trends that we're seeing. So we'll start diving into more of the FOIA type things. So Kim, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Jess will certainly take over because she is, as she mentioned, hands-on on these all the time. So Jess, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So what we did was we kind of heard what we've kind of put into here, what we've heard from our state and local governments primarily, right? And there's a lot of challenges that they have. And so we took what we're calling the most common, meaning we've heard it from almost every single person, right? And one of the biggest things is the resource constraints. So the volumes of data are getting larger, the volumes of requests are getting larger. A lot of that is because of social media and everybody's posting what's happening and where. Some of it is from the news. People see things on the news. They want to put in those requests as well. And so we're finding that the volume is increasing, but the resources are not. You're not necessarily getting to hire a bunch of new people to help. You're not necessarily getting a lot more budget. So the constraints are still there. And how can we help you with using the resources that you have as well as meeting the volume that you're getting as well? Sensitive information. So one of the things that we are seeing a bunch is how do we redact some of the information that we cannot release to the public? And how do we do that in an efficient way to where we make sure that nothing is getting missed and that we're not providing anything that we shouldn't? So in all of these common challenges that I'm going to speak about here, we're going to go more in depth and we'll talk about what you can find and what kind of platforms you can find to help you with this. These are just some of the challenges we're going to start with. Legal compliance. So making sure you're hitting those deadlines. FOIA requests, as you all know, have very tight deadlines, whereas eDiscovery, typically you get more time and those deadlines aren't quite as tight. So making sure that you're keeping up with the volume, scrubbing all of the information, and meeting the deadline from the requester as well. Lack of standardization. So what we're finding here is even within one specific organization, people are doing things very differently. And it doesn't necessarily make it wrong. It just means that if somebody is out or something is being requested by two different parties, that maybe things aren't getting delivered in the exact same way. So finding a way to kind of standardize and make sure that everything is being held in a unique and organized way and getting it into a fashion that they can understand. And then data complexity. This goes kind of to what Rick had mentioned before, right? You've got a lot of emerging data types. Finding a platform that can handle all of the standard, what we kind of call traditional data types, as well as any additional data types that come in that maybe are not as prevalent, but are starting to be requested or starting to be seen as well. And then litigation risks, making sure that there is defensibility around every single step that you have taken throughout the process of the FOIA requests.
Thank you, Jess, for mapping this out. I think it just provided a very big picture of all these building blocks that currently at this point in time, so many of us are dealing with. But when you were talking about different data types, different types of information and just sensitive information in general, I actually, fun fact, I started off my career working in First Amendment and media litigation. And so we were dealing with, journalists, FOIA requests directly, but also being at a law firm side, we were redacting by a Word doc. Terrible to say, but obviously that opens up, manual errors, human errors, and it just takes a lot of time and resources. And not only that, you're passing the costs on to your clients and nobody's happy. And so just kind of wanted to pause here because especially within, Rick talked about all these new data types and just overarching data management. We are at a time where we are creating as much data as we have in all of history in the past few years. And that's a lot of data. And what is the cost of doing nothing with that data, especially if you have to be exposed to eDiscovery, future eDiscovery requests, or a FOIA request, and you have to fulfill that. The cost of a data breach, talking about sensitive information, as of this year, according to IBM, costs for almost $5 million. And so scrubbing all of that PII, starting with the building blocks, will help obviously reduce that exposure. But people are also not thinking about just bad data sitting around that you don't need. I kind of use the analogy of, you keeping a lot of clothes that you don't wear anymore. They may or may not have tags on them, taking up space in your wardrobe. And Gartner actually puts a price tag on that, and bad data and data that, should not be exposed or published or being given out to the public stands at almost $13 million. And so, as we all plan for 2025, putting in budget, putting in new asks and reviewing new platforms, thinking about it from an overarching data and information governance, and starting with these building blocks will also then help the overarching organization. And so I spoke a little bit about that. A lot of folks, and you may or may not be further along the process of thinking about these things as you head into 2025, but Gartner reported that 60% of decision makers are actually not aware of the financial costs. And so a lot of the challenges, aside from the technical complexities and all of that, is really educating your internal stakeholders regarding why this is important. And so when you think about eDiscovery and FOIA requests, Rick mentioned being reactive, and moving forward, putting on your proactive hat, putting on your strategic buy-in hat, and getting folks to get on board, positioning it as this will help build good data hygiene habits. This will also help you know exactly where your data is stored. And then once all of those building blocks behind the scenes steps starts to evolve, then you can start classifying that data. Then you can start protecting your data. And then as you do all of these housekeeping things in the back end, fulfilling FOIA requests or eDiscovery requests will then become less challenging and less time consuming once all of those building blocks starts getting taken care of. And so really thinking through, even before you think about getting a technology or deploying a new technology or implementing a new technology, thinking through, making sure that you're actually reviewing what needs to be cleaned up today and preparing the tasks and preparing folks as part of that change management and process before you even think about what platform you should be, reviewing. And so Jess and Rick will jump into some potential questions as you think through a platform. And it seems a little counterintuitive because Gimmal is a software company to say, don't think about the technology just yet. But we see a lot of folks buying a technology and then not having that technology being aligned to their needs and or realizing that the technology has a gap with what they are trying to achieve. So back to you, Jess. And I do see Dirk raising a hand, so I can just pause right here. Dirk, did you want to ask your question in the Q&A or chat function before we move on? Okay, and if not, take it away, Jess.
Sure. And if the question comes in, we can pause and read it as well. No, I love what you said. Absolutely, technology is beneficial, but if you don't have the right people and the right processes in place, then the technology could be kind of useless if you don't have a way of utilizing it, right? So having the processes and people in place is absolutely key before you implement a technology. So I love that you covered that. So what we did is we're going to cover what to look for in a platform that can assist with FOIA request and eDiscovery as well. And Rick will kind of touch on some of the eDiscovery aspect too, but we wanted to kind of cover what are things you could look for in any platform that you want to implement, and then also go into what kind of questions you can ask any of those providers to make sure it is the right technology for you, because each technology works different and you need to utilize it differently, and you have people at different levels. So all we want to do is just give a little bit of consideration as to some things that you might want to be aware of. So what to look for in a platform? You have those volumes of requests. You need something that's efficient to use, something that's actually going to get you through those volumes of requests quicker. And the resources constraints, it needs to be easy. We all know that you can't pause the requests coming in and take 2-3 weeks to actually learn how to use a system to get those requests out. So it needs to be something that you can integrate very quickly and be efficient to use as well. Can it handle multiple data types, right? I mean, even if you take out what we kind of coin as modern data and you focus just on traditional data, think of all the different types of Office documents and different kinds of files. And every couple of years, the Office documents update, and a Word doc now has an extra X at the end of the extension, right? So all of these are constantly updating. So make sure that your platform can handle that too. You know what data types you have. And so you can get very specific when you're looking at those platforms. And then we mentioned, sensitive information. Make sure they have their compliance certifications. Ask to see those. That's well within your rights to make sure that everything is compliant and certified as well. And I kind of go into a little bit later, but third-party certifications for that legal compliance are even better. Lack of standardization. Find something that can create templates. So that way, if you have one person that goes in and they create a template, then it's something somebody else can use later. And it goes back to that efficiency, right? Why make everybody do the same thing? Provide results within that timeline. Make sure they're accountable. Figure out what are their speeds, how quickly can things process, how quickly can you get in there and start working with your data. And training and awareness. So what we always like to do is find somebody that's going to give you a dedicated resource, because software companies can get very large and they have a lot of employees. Do you want to have to explain your specific workflow and your specific questions every single time? Or do you want to have somebody that, okay, I know what this county needs. Let me go and help with that one question and kind of cut that time in half. Another big problem is the technology adoption. So we have a lot of people that say, it just works. I'm making it work. It's maybe a little stressful, maybe a little bit to that, 10th hour at sometimes, but it's working and I know what I'm doing. So why rock the boat? And then also the litigation risks. So one of the things that we're going to kind of cover is why that training is important, to make sure that you have that defensibility as well.
Yeah, I really resonate with the defensibility because again, and we have a lot of folks using Excel spreadsheets to manage things. And of course, that just opens up, I don't know, we need a lawyer on the call, but does an Excel spreadsheet, is that defensible in court? I would probably say no. Okay, so technology and process. We talked about, obviously the technology is important, but what exactly should we be thinking about in terms of features so that we get the right outcomes?
Yeah, so when we look at technology as a whole, okay, so coming from eDiscovery, it's always fun to sit in on demos and you see all the pretty pictures. You see all the charts and graphs and how easy this is to use for the middle part of it. But for FOIA requests, for eDiscovery, data processing, getting data into the system quickly and efficiently is really, really important as well. So we'll hone into questions here in a little bit, but I just wanted to punctuate getting data in and getting data out. It's also just as important as all the pretty pictures in the middle. So I just want to kick us off there, but go ahead, Jess. I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is obviously a lot of software platforms have an abundance of features and so many things that you can do out there. It's constantly evolving, right? So what we wanted to focus on is not all of, like Rick mentioned, all the pretty pictures and all the, fun, fancy things that you can do, but what are key to your role and what are the most important things? And that's getting the data in, searching the data, analyzing it, and then getting the data out to produce over to that requesting party. So those are going to be the things that we hyper focus on, because all the other stuff can always come later, right? Once you have the platform implemented and you're meeting those deadlines and you're, doing all of that, then you can get to some of the nice to haves and the pretty pictures and things that apply to the eDiscovery aspect as well.
And another piece coming from the eDiscovery world, getting pulled into using the same technology for FOIA and similar type requests, eDiscovery crossover is really important because you can use the same platform for compliance, for investigations, litigation, these FOIA type requirements and requests. So look for a platform that might also fit cross-departmentally, if that's, but you know what I mean? Like if other departments can leverage the same technology, because typically platforms are a purchase per year and you get this enterprise license and user fees are going away. So it can be utilized for many different things. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that too, Rick, I think for those, especially within enterprises, you may not even be aware that another team is using another software. And so breaking down those silos as you find out, exactly where your data is being stored, but also breaking down your organizational silos to figure out what technology you're using or not using is obviously very important too. And just backtracking a little bit with your comment around data in, data out, especially with AI. We have a lot of customers, especially in public sector, just thinking about how to deploy AI to be more efficient, more effective, more accurate. And there was a report that recently came out saying that 80% of organizations who try to deploy AI right now will fail because they are not focusing on the basics. And the basics is getting your data processes in place as well as the data quality.
Yeah. So we'll segue now into a series of questions that you should consider when you're interviewing software companies, software and services companies, whatever that might be. These are ones that you can take some notes on to possibly ask during those demonstrations or discovery calls. So one of the first, probably out of the gate ones you might ask is, how could this product help me solve workload issues when fulfilling public records requests? So Jess, elaborate a bit on this question, please.
Yeah, I really like this one because it does two things. So obviously you find out what their pitch is for fulfilling the records. You find out what they say makes it more efficient and easy to use. But what you're also getting out of this without having to ask is if it's actually something they specialize in, because maybe they're a software organization that's had, one or two state or local agencies and maybe a couple of FOIA requests come through, but maybe that's not what their primary focus is. And so they don't necessarily know the workflows that differ between that eDiscovery side. So you're getting that question answered without actually having to ask it, and you're finding out what their level of experience is and the expertise surrounding the public records requests.
And the next one is on the other side, so the requester's side. What is their experience going to be like? So asking that question will be interesting to see how they answer it. But Jess, what are your thoughts?
So this is nice. There's several different platforms out there, and sometimes they come with a portal, and that has the public requester where they can go in and they can make that request, and it's linked within the software as well. And then there's others that are separated, and different cities and counties, they have their own workflow of how they already utilize a portal, or do they not utilize one? And so what this is going to do is figure out where that separation is. Are you looking for a singular technology that does both, or do you already have a portal that is completely set up and easy to use, and you're just looking for that technology in the middle? And even so, if you're separating it out, the way that you're helping with that experience is by getting them what they've requested quickly, right? So it doesn't have to be an all-in-one. It can be what is working for your city or county, or what you would like to work for it, and just making sure that you're giving the public requester the information that they've requested within that time frame, and they'll have a great experience.
Now, the next one here is is really thematic throughout our conversation today, and that is how does the platform offer customizable workflows to adapt to your agency's specific needs and processes? Okay, I come from eDiscovery. We built this platform to accommodate eDiscovery. That includes investigations, employment, white collar, all different types, large data cases, small data cases. So all of that, right? Well, the same is true with FOIA type requests. Jess mentioned earlier that every agency operates and manages these processes just slightly differently. Does the platform itself cover off a lot of those needs that are specific to how you would want to run these types of requests? I may have stolen all your thunder there, Jess, but anything you want to add here?
No, you're welcome to. No thunder stolen. So what is nice about making sure that they have customizable workflows is it's going to be something you hear us just say consistently, right? Because it's so true. Every agency is different. There are some that have a dedicated IT team in their building ready to help with all requests. And then there are others that might be smaller, and they have to share an IT team with the police department and with other departments and with other agencies. And so the reason I bring that up is the workflow will vary for those. You will have the people that have dedicated IT team, their IT team might load the data for them. And then all they're going to do is have to come in and actually review it, right? But for those smaller agencies, you need to make sure that okay, they don't have an IT team, and the people that's going to be looking at this data are not IT specialists, but they still have to be able to get the data into the platform. So can you create a workflow for the non-IT person to get this data in and be able to start their processes? So that's just one example of a customized workflow that you can do. And then also going back to some of those template creations that we mentioned before, right? People do get vacations every now and then, or people do go out sick every now and then. So if you can customize a workflow to the agency and you have templates that back it up, all you have to do is have one person that can come in and they can click on that template and they can get the documents out. And that way there's no gap and there's no lull, and you're not, missing out on valuable time that you don't necessarily have to spare.
And speaking of time, we'll do some of these rapid fire just because we do have a lot of questions we want you to jot down and ask those providers, but we do have a limited amount of time too. So this one's very table stakes, straightforward, right? Does the platform offer features for securely redacting sensitive information from documents? And can you save those so they persist if you have to produce that same email, that same document again? So Jess, anything to add there, or shall we move on to the next?
Just so that we're not doing it out of Word like Kim mentioned before, right?
Yes.
So make sure you have a platform that has those safeguards. Yeah. They have those safeguards built in to make sure that not only are you redacting it, but it's not producing any text that's underneath it. You don't have to remember how to save it specifically. So yes, absolutely, kind of standardized there. Don't have to go too much further into it, but you mentioned it, Kim, so I had to kind of make the joke a little bit.
Yeah. And like a step above redacting too is, especially for those in Microsoft 365. We have a lot of customers within that ecosystem, and just labeling sensitive information at that level already helps tons, because then you have the standardized way of literally labeling what is sensitive, so that you can then reduce the amount of reviews or, you know, hyper focused, as you say, so that you're not reviewing 10,000 unnecessary documents that just for potential redacting, right? And so that will reduce costs, reduce scope, resources. So it's really, I'm just getting a lot of memories from the law firm days right now. So.
And then security would be a very similar table stakes thing. Have the questions ahead of time ready to ask what their security posture is. If this is a cloud-based solution, if it's on premise, does that have, you know, as a subject to it? Probably not. You would have a lot of those safety or security mechanisms in place. But Jess, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, and this one, I don't know that we have to go too deep into as well, but if it is that cloud-based, right, making sure that they have those compliances, they have those certifications, but what kind of admin features and functionality do they have? Not everybody within the city or the organization needs to see every single case that the entire county has online, right? So making sure you can pick and choose who has access to what documents or what cases or what requests, and being able to really lock it down. Even some get as granular as seeing only specific documents within a database. So Rick could log in and see 1,000 documents and I might only see 2, right? So just see what granularity they can give you for that access and that protection.
This is super important, because in the context of data security, a lot of data breaches, intentionally or unintentionally, are caused by users, whether they're internal or former employees. So this, I think this is, we don't always think about that directly, but these are all really great questions. So thank you for addressing this.
Yeah, and in the same vein, right? So does it allow multiple users to collaborate and access the same data at the same time? Typically, this is cloud solutions, right? These are ways where Jess is mentioning you give access, whether it's at 2 documents or all of them. Can you collaborate on the same data at the same time? All right, and then the other part is just a sort of general, does the company offer any additional services or resources to help agencies improve their FOIA and request management process? Jess, this is right in your wheelhouse. So how do you typically work with agencies in this way?
This is where I really kind of hone in on have a dedicated resource or resources, right? Because even at the software side, if you have your one person out. So have a primary person, have a backup person, make sure that they document what your requests typically are like. There's different timelines. Some have 7 days, some have 10, and others in the middle, right? So making sure that you have a dedicated resource that knows your process, knows your workflow, doesn't have to be caught up to speed for the first 15 minutes of the call to go over those. And that to me is, we call it kind of a service, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a paid thing, right? But it is a service that the company is offering, giving you a direct resource and someone to lean on. And then also making sure, do they have documentation? You might be doing things after hours to meet some deadlines, and maybe they don't have 24-hour service, but do they have FAQ sections? Do they have video tutorials? Do they have written documentation? And other services could be things like, hey, listen, I've gone in and I've done all the review, I've done the redactions, I need to move on to the next one, but I still have to get these documents exported. Do they have a team that can go in and can they export those documents for you, or perform any other types of services within the platform itself? So just seeing, do they have a services department? What is their support team like? Do they have somebody that can go in and actually support and provide services for the entire software platform itself, and getting to that information?
And then a simple question, and so you'll get varied answers, but just how does the platform handle large volumes of data or varying levels of complexity in those requests?
Yeah, I think this is what folks struggle with the most. A lot of our customers, and I don't know if you all deal with this on your side too, is that they know the data is out there. They don't know exactly what types of data is living where and who has access to it. So going back to what you all have already addressed, large volumes of data or complex requests will vary. That definition will vary across, I mean, all types of companies, all types of industries. And so making sure that the platform you're evaluating is actually able to do that. But also one way to do that is to potentially ask your community or user groups or other closed communities for referrals or for actual proven record, pun intended, of the platform's performance. And so asking for customer references as you evaluate the platform, or someone who can actually speak to the platform's capabilities is very important. I think one question to you all is, do you typically see customers kind of building out or review platforms from the bottom up or top down? And what I mean by that is, do they think about the IG umbrella first as they look for eDiscovery or FOIA requests capable platform, or is it more of, we're doing all of this and we now need to ladder it up to a broader IG strategy?
Yeah. In a similar way for table stakes and things that need to be there, but you'll get varied answers. Can the system generate audit trails or logs to track changes and ensure accountability in the request management process? We come from, again, eDiscovery. That also helps a ton with FOIA, but we have to have who clicked on what, who logged in, when did they log out? All of those are there, whether that's necessary or needed. It's likely overkill from my perspective, but it is super important to get an idea of how they're managing that. Jess, what are your thoughts?
No, it's great from the FOIA aspect, but even kind of bringing in some of that eDiscovery, right? This is where you're going to do those priv logs. So making sure that you have the ability to have logs and track changes for the actual work product and the documents, as well as the audit side, where let's say you have a bunch of reviewers that you've brought in and you're making sure that they're in there during the certain times and kind of checking those trails as well. So it helps from all different aspects, whether it is identifying specific privileged information for documents or hourly tracking if you've got a bunch of review contract people. So just making sure you have insight into the data and who's touching your data.
Yeah, thank you all for sticking around. We have just a few more questions, and we'll get into some other real fun content. But pricing, right? So just understanding the pricing model. Sometimes don't even ask, what does it cost? What's the model itself? But Jess, I know you've got some opinions here and thoughts.
I do, but I know we have quite a few slides, so I'll keep it short. Just obviously, you've got budget constraints and certain things over a certain dollar amount have to get approved. So just making sure that, you don't buy a platform that's within that budget and then everything they want you to do within it is an add-on and an extra. And so just getting all of the information up front, which sounds very self-explanatory, but trust me, I've heard some stories from other experiences. So just making sure you do ask that question.
Okay, just two more left. But this one's very important. And it actually is funny because I had to purchase some software for the marketing department recently. And I had interviewed maybe 5 companies. And so I was like, oh, this is the one right here. And it looked really easy to use. And it was. It was one of those self-service, easy to use. But then I was like, ooh, I don't know how to do this one thing. I reached out there like for training or just, hey, can somebody just help, spitball something here real quick? Nope, zero training, right? So I bought a 100% self-service platform that ultimately I figured it out, yes, but would have been a fast, quick call. So asking and confirming what type of training support could be very important. I'm sure, Jess, you've got some thoughts here as well.
Yeah, I think I've kind of hammered those in throughout, right? Getting those dedicated resources and the FAQs and the documentation. So yeah, just making sure that that comes included or what that would look like when you do get the software.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because it's not just you, Rick, it's training for folks on the broader team or potentially your stakeholders too. Because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. And it's also part of that internal buy-in, internal education.
Yeah. And then this one is interesting. Ask this question though, how long does it take to get started? Because sometimes you might make assumptions on the call. Oh, this is super easy. It'll be up and running in a few hours, but you never know. Like there might be some 3-month thing with involving IT or something. So ask this question. But Jess, why don't you finalize our questions here with your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a great time to figure out about their onboarding as well. So is this something, can you get up and running in the same day? Is this something that it's going to take them a couple of days to get user accounts created and then a couple of days to set up your specific platform and your view there? So just how long does it take to get started? Because we've already established that you can't pause the requests coming in, and you want to make sure that you can get it implemented very quickly and get using it quickly. I'm sure everybody wants you to sign a contract quickly, but it doesn't always mean that it's going to get implemented and the software is going to be rolled out to you just as quickly. So how long does it typically take to get started? This is also going to give you a little insight into how easy it actually is to use. If they say, oh, most of our customers are figuring it out, by the second week, or is it the second day? And just another one of those, asking a question that you don't always have to, you get an answer that you don't have to specifically ask for.
Mm-hmm.
So now we'll move into some, oh, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, no, I just said thank you both for walking through all of that, because a lot of times, a lot of our customers, but I'm sure folks on the webinar too, you use the software, but you're not always buying the software. And so these are the questions that you can help someone within your team or even more broadly think through so that, you get what you need.
Yeah, great point.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go over some examples here quickly. So Jess will talk about some public sector examples, and then I'll switch over to some private sector examples. But Jess, please.
Yeah, perfect. So what we kind of tried to do here is we took 2 different counties with very different populations. They also had different struggles and kind of wanted to show how you can use the same platform. And one of the reasons that we did this, even though we're using a county to county example, is also kind of letting you realize that you might have somebody in the FOIA and the public records part that is having certain struggles. And then you might have somebody in the eDiscovery litigation that are having different struggles, but how can you find a platform that marries those both together, right? So these are 2 counties that I actually work very closely with. And County A, for example, they had extremely large data sets, multiple users. Obviously, the tight deadlines is going to be the same for most counties, but they were having inconsistent search results. And what they were doing is they were having their IT team, because they actually had one dedicated to them, run search terms and run searches within kind of Microsoft Outlook itself. And what you'll find is, depending on when you do that, the indexing can sometimes be slightly different. So they might run the search terms one day, and then the very next day they can run the same search terms and get different search results. And this kind of was bringing back a little bit of uncertainty for them, and they wanted to make sure that they were getting everything. And I will say County A actually had a different software that they were using that they really liked. And the reason that they ended up switching over was because we could guarantee them that they could put those larger data sets in, and they could still keep it within their county's budget, right? So getting all the data, maybe from specific specific date ranges, and then bringing that into the platform and making sure you're getting consistent results, because the indexing has already been run once, and it doesn't matter if you're running it day 1 or day 2, it's going to be the same. And then County B, they had smaller data sets, but they had no platform that they were currently using. And so they were having trouble with those redactions. They would take an email and they would print it to PDF, and then they would try to redact it in Adobe, and then they would have to make sure that they saved it a specific way. And then how do they take all of these different data types and then combine them back together to deliver over to that requesting party? So very different struggles, but they found the same solution works for both, right? So that quick ingestion and processing for those larger data sets, the no user fees, which enables the collaboration. So whether it's multiple or a couple, obviously the tight deadlines goes back to that quick ingestion, the advanced searching, so making sure you get consistent search results. And then making sure you can do all of your redactions in one place, and finding a platform that has some safety guards built in. So maybe you don't have to click that extra save button. And once it does that and you're exporting it out, it automatically scrubs that text behind it. That's really important in eDiscovery and very well known, but it's not as well known on the public record side. And then getting those documents out in one unified format that the requester can actually view and have mean something to them, and getting it out in a standardized way.
So when we look at the private sector, I'll run a similar path here. So we'll do small law versus large law. Now, small law, it's a completely different type of business. They're typically focused on family matters, could be employment, or local matters. But they're limited number of large cases, but a lot of bread and butter. They still need to look at emails. They still need to review documents from a small business. And so having access to simple technology, and as you'll see here, another theme is same solution for both. It's because we want to be accessible for any type of case, right? So small number of large cases, and what happens is that happens only a few times a year. So the training curve, they're sort of relearning the process every time they do it. So having a solution that's easy is really important. And typically within small law, they also don't have a lot of resources. They need to rely on companies that can also help them if they need 15 attorneys to start reviewing or jumping in on the data, to have those services available. We're also finding, especially with the new data types, is that the case complexity is changing. Opposing parties are asking for different types of data that some of these attorneys haven't been exposed to before in a discovery process. And so having a platform that makes it easy is certainly going to be necessary. Now, large law is sort of the opposite. They are really good. They have a lot of big cases, but they also have a lot of bread and butter. The big cases, they're going to use things that involve typically complex data analytics, but they also have a lot of bread and butter that just need to go through a traditional review process. That's where like a CloudNine comes in to help with all of those bread and butter cases. But they also have the issue of data culling. So we have found that we might have a case where there's a bunch of Slack data. So we had a case, for instance, where they said, hey, Rick, we've got 18 gigs of JSON files that we need to review from Slack. Can you just put them in CloudNine Review and we'll just review everything? We said, sure, we could. That would be great for us, volume, money, all the things. But we said, look, let's take a look at the data, because it was 80 million messages. We ran it through a culling process, culled it down to less than 1 million. They had 40 attorneys scoped out to review this over 3 months. 3 did it in just 3 weeks, right? So there's better ways to look at this data. And that's one of the considerations when it comes to these new types and even more custodians here. But ultimately, having a solution that fits both is really important.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through that. But I'm also trying to not rush us, but just being mindful of time here. So, talk to me a little bit about CloudNine Review.
So CloudNine Review is a single platform that handles traditional data for us is going to be your emails and documents. But it's also going to be Slack, Teams, social media data. You want a drag and drop simple processing solution. That's what it does. So you're not having to push a bunch of buttons, do some pre-culling, convert everything to documents first. So DIY processing, really for the most part, is just pointing to the source data and pulling it in. And that's going to be true for traditional and modern data. Then the analysis of that is in such a way where you can review everything together, where you can see the conversation might start over email, then they switch over to Teams. Then they might pick up their phone, start using WhatsApp because it's encrypted end to end and nobody will ever see these messages. No, I'm just kidding, but we actually pull the WhatsApp data in and you can see that all together, that single thread conversation across multiple things. Those are some of the considerations you'll see within CloudNine Review. And then productions themselves all have to fit very different requests. And so accommodating the variability in those productions is important. And then also fitting the pricing model to that firm or corporation is also important. That's what CloudNine Review is in a nutshell.
I think when you talk about supporting over different data types, some emerging challenges, especially as a lot of our customers migrate off of legacy systems and using different platforms, is that some of these file types are not readable or not accessible to begin with. And then of course, if you are tasked with producing these requests and you can't read a file, that's obviously a problem. And so just things that we're thinking about and we're seeing as an emerging challenge as different systems and platforms evolve. And so this is, kudos to you all. CloudNine has done a lot of great work for a lot of huge agencies and customers here. But I think a lot of the new challenges is the modern data. It's not just email now where, I'm highlighting printed documents and emails, but really looking at text messaging, Slack, and all of those other communication formats too. And then educational content. Both Rick and Jess, they speak on a number of panels every year, different events, different conferences, but as they mentioned, continuing training and education. I mean, the landscape is changing so quickly. So being able to find a provider who's also your educational partner is really important. Did you want to tell people more about these resources specifically, Rick, or?
Just a quick 15 seconds. I spent a lot of time this year focusing in on writing a long form article about text and chat data in eDiscovery. But I also did a long form article on FOIA requests and how to manage the public records type requests. Both of those are on our website. I also have blogs associated to them and other media. There's other webinars. So we really are trying to educate the market versus just trying to offer solutions.
Yeah. And again, thank you everybody for joining virtually. We often see folks on site in person, especially with the slew of conferences and trade shows, including ARMA InfoCon. But next week, for those out in San Diego or traveling to San Diego for InfoGov World, our team will be on site. Myself, I will be at ARMA New England next week. We are co-hosting the Red Sox and Minnesota Twins baseball game after the conference. So excited to see you all. And then our next InfoNext webinar will be with another partner, Caligo, and we will dive into email management, modernizing your records management within the umbrella of data governance and data protection. So our speaker will be Dean Meisenheimer and Tim Brady, CEO of Caligo. And then last but not least, I know RJ provided a promo code, but see you at ARMA InfoCon next month. We will be at booth 804. And we have two sessions. The first one is with Dean Gonzowski, our CRO, talking about records retention and defensible disposition. And then for those of you who are familiar with Gimmal, as well as David Quackenbush, he will be talking about AI and practical applications in the modern IG practice and programs and initiatives. So we are so excited to see you all. And thank you again, Jess and Rick. This has been such a great educational session for me, but also just kind of, path down memory lane for myself as well. And very glad I'm out of the legal world, but I'm still working with a lot of legal folks, obviously, so.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jess, Rick, and Kim. Maybe in the last minute or two that we have, I did have one question I wanted to throw at you that was maybe more of a crystal ball question, but where do you see the future of FOIA requests going? What is really kind of that top thing that you think is going to be moving FOIA request eDiscovery forward in the next couple of years?
So Jess, you want to, or?
Yeah, either one, that's really fine. So I certainly don't see them slowing down any. As more technology comes out and there's more ways to video people doing things and video people who are videoing people doing things, it's it's going to just become so much more prevalent. And I think what's going to start happening is we are going to start seeing a lot more of that modern data come in that I haven't seen yet, whereas it's such traditional data and the emails or body cam footage or things that are being sent. I think it's going to start being really important on that modern data side that you have a way to review it. So much what we see in eDiscovery ends up translating over to FOIA a little bit later, right? We're just a couple of years behind. And one of the things that it used to be in eDiscovery is I won't ask you for yours if you don't ask me for mine, because I don't know how to review it and I don't know how to produce it. And I do think that that's really going to come into play, and you're going to want to know how to review it so you can ask for theirs, and it's not something that you're avoiding as well.
All those things. It's great. I see it the exact same way. If we want to use legal as an example, as the sort of leading indicator of what's to come, we are seeing it more and more getting requested, demanded, especially the DOJ, FTC requesting, demanding this data from agencies that are having to deal with compliance. So be ready for it, have some process in place, talk to the right people, especially on the IG side, and then you'll be ready for it whenever that does start coming. It's akin to when I was in Florida, we used to say no to the emails, yes to the file cabinets. That didn't last very long, around 2006, 2007, and then everything changed, right? I think we're finding the same thing with modern data and legal. I think we'll see the same in FOIA.
Get ready for the text messages to come into play.
First, yeah.
Yeah, we were just chatting and kind of riffing before today's webinar, but just kind of closing it out from an overarching data and IG perspective, where it's information chaos right now. And I think FOIA requests and eDiscovery requests, it's very reactive, but also context will be important. Maybe a simple FOIA request on, XYZ, people don't really start connecting the dots, but FOIA request A, FOIA request B, FOIA request C, and then suddenly bad actors can make connections between all of this information for nefarious reasons or purposes. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm just putting on my future forward hat, but with AI, anything is possible, right? Like we have a lot of data in, data out, and reducing and having robust IG strategies for the entire model across the life cycle will be so important, because intent data or data that is not directly inferring, leading to potential negative outcomes will be really important to think through, and only humans can do that. And so going back to the processes, the workflows, all of that, and you can't be proactive if you haven't done the not sexy work of, all the building blocks. So just wanted to kind of, cap that out with that.
No, thank you. That was great. Thank you all. I want to say thank you again to all of our attendees for the webinar. Massive thank you to the speakers for today. And we do hope to see everyone at more of our ARMA webinars soon. We have a good slew of them coming up. Even heading into InfoCon, we have some good content in our webinars. And as a quick reminder, the slides and the recording will be available, and you'll have a follow-up email within 24 hours. But if you have any questions, you can also email us at armaservice@arma.org.
Thank you all. Thank you, RJ.
Thanks, RJ. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.